Welcome to Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM. Make it legendary. I'm Jamie Eisenberg. That's Dave Richard. That's Heath Cummings. Got a legendary game tonight between the Cowboys and the Lions, at least we hope. Got a legendary week. It's week 14, last week before the fantasy playoffs in the majority of leagues. Got 4 teams on a bye. That's not necessarily legendary, but we're going to give you some legendary fantasy advice to help you get those lineups right. And guys, it's going to be fun with the first position that we're talking about because it's quarterbacks. And usually it's a very deep position. There's a lot of guys that we like. Not so much this week. Let's start with the rankings here. Start right off the bat here with the quarterbacks that we're hoping are going to be in the top 12. But there's going to be some guys that we're a little bit concerned about, especially when you start to get past, really, for me, it's the top 3. I feel good about Josh Allen, Dak Prescott, and Matthew Stafford. I feel okay about Jared Goff. I feel okay about Joe Burrow. And then it kind of gets a lot of questions. I do like Jacoby Brissett. He's the start of the week. We'll talk about that in a second. But as soon as we get to Patrick Mahomes, we're going to show you some guys or talk about some guys that are tough quarterbacks for us to rank. And Dave, that's the first name on your list for you is Patrick Mahomes. And I get it. His offensive line's a mess. The matchup is not easy. He's clearly been awesome. He's been awesome at home. But is he a slam dunk? I feel great that Patrick Mahomes is going to win me my fantasy week.
I don't feel great, but I don't think I'm sitting him unless I've got Jacoby Brissett, Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, one of those types of quarterback. Dak Prescott,
Stafford,
you've got those two guys. Stafford too, obviously. But we saw what this Texans defense did to Josh Allen and the Bills when the Bills' offensive line had some issues. And it was ugly. And I am nervous about what's going to happen to Patrick Mahomes. But I'm nervous about 20 quarterbacks this week. So it's really tough to look at Patrick Mahomes and say, oh, yeah, sure, he's going to get 25 fantasy points. Put him in your lineup. He's good to go. I don't know if it's going to happen. When protection breaks down, he can't throw downfield. He's going to need to get the ball out quick and really lean on his mobility. Maybe he gets to 22 fantasy points.
If you do projections, and when you're projecting quarterbacks for this week, is there
anybody good? Is there anybody good in quarterback?
How many above 20 fantasy points?
So I've got 7 at 21 or more. I've got 11 at 20 or more.
Okay, so still a good number of quarterbacks.
Most weeks that's closer to like 16.
Yeah, so
four that disappoint. So it's definitely a bad week. One of those quarterbacks that's at 20, but I don't think you could put an accurate projection on him, is Lamar Jackson. And it's because he's been awful for the last few weeks, and he has the upside to score more points than any quarterback at any given moment. And we saw glimpses of it last week. He really had a rough time in terms of what his pass catchers did for him and what the officials did. There was a pass interference penalty called on Zay Flowers that wiped out a touchdown that I think that play probably happens 3 times a game and doesn't get called a penalty. There was the Isaiah Likely catch where he fumbles going into the end zone. He scores those 2 touchdowns. It was a good game. We're not even thinking about whether or not we're starting Lamar Jackson. Now we really have to think about it. I don't dislike the matchup at all. I do think he looked a little bit better last week. The rushing production was up a little bit last week to 27 yards on the ground. This is a must-win game in the division. I think we get good Lamar Jackson, I hope, but there's no floor.
So Dave, I know you have Lamar Jackson to sit. We just got through doing a segment on CBS Sports HQ. You said the Steelers' backs are against the wall. The Ravens' backs are against the wall, too.
Everybody's backs are against the wall in the AFC North.
Obviously, this is a win. I don't want to say win or go home situation because they can each still win the division with a loss here. But when you're looking at Lamar, I know you're saying to sit him. His track record against Mike Tomlin is awful. The rushing production should be fantastic for Derrick Henry in this game, as we just saw what Buffalo did. So can Lamar Jackson overcome maybe game script and history here? For me, it's almost like it's FOMO. It's because I know what this guy can do and he's right. And I know it hasn't been great. But as Heath just illustrated, last week if he has 20-plus points, despite the fumbles and the miscues, if he comes away with a positive fantasy line, are you still sitting him in this matchup?
Probably not, but he wouldn't be like a top 8 quarterback for me, even with the touchdowns.
None of us have him there. And if you see, none of us have him there.
Right, and let's remember, that was against Cincinnati, and that's one of the easiest matchups for basically any position in football. And the fact that he had 7 fantasy points, and he could have had in the neighborhood of 20, like you talked about, that's still not great. That's still not what we expect. And you talk about FOMO. Dude, I've had FOMO for the past 3 weeks with Lamar Jackson. I've had enough. Heath said that he looked better last week. I didn't see a lot of it, and I'm very worried about what the Steelers are going to do. Given their history, given how they've taken him down, especially as a thrower, as a runner, he did well last year in the playoff game against them. I'm very concerned, and this is also a factor. The Steelers have allowed one quarterback to get north of 20 fantasy points since week 9. Josh Allen went up against this team last week and didn't get 20 fantasy points against them.
Yeah, I mean, look, game script has been bad. The run defense has been awful. This should be a huge game for Derrick Henry.
I agree.
You brought up something on our podcast that I don't know if you remember about what the scenarios may be if you need production from your quarterback. Can you repeat that?
No, I think if I am a 15, 20-point favorite in my matchup this week and I feel like, man, 18 points would be fantastic, then I think there's probably 18 quarterbacks that you could start over Lamar Jackson. If you're just looking for the guy to give you okay production. But if you look at your projections or if you're looking at it yourself and you think, man, I'm a huge underdog in this game, Lamar Jackson's exactly the type of guy that you throw in your lineup because it's not going to matter if you get 16 to 18. You need 30. Lamar Jackson can give you 30 any given week.
One of those rare quarterbacks, obviously. And the guy I think you're looking at in that, I'll bump it up a little bit to 20, 18 to 20 or 16 to 20, is Daniel Jones. He was, to me, very good the last two games because of who he was playing. At Kansas City, gets you 20 fantasy points. Against Houston, gets you 20 fantasy points. And now this week, he's taking on a Jacksonville defense that, for the most part, has been bad this season. But I have some PTSD of a quarterback going into Jacksonville that was playing well, and that was Justin Herbert. He was the starter of the week 3 weeks ago when he went into Jacksonville, and they destroyed him. And it wouldn't shock me if Daniel Jones completely vomits all over himself in this matchup because the Colts never win in Jacksonville. It's been 2014 since they actually won against the Jaguars in their building. And you're talking about a quarterback that's not mobile right now because of the broken leg that he's playing through or the broken bone in his leg. So could he still get you 20 fantasy points? Yes. I think he's proven that. He's had a very solid season. His receivers should have big games this week, Michael Pittman and Alec Pierce specifically. Tyler Warren obviously should play well. And let's be real. Jonathan Taylor is not performing at the same level that he was a few weeks ago because of the teams that he's faced, and the Jacksonville run defense is great. So can they limit Taylor and force Jones to throw? Yes. But I'm just a little bit concerned, like, can Jones be top 10 like you have him? Can he be 15th? You know, is a guy like Tyrod Taylor potentially better who's coming off a 20-point game himself? So I think if you have Daniel Jones, you just kind of start him. I think our host Adam Azer said it on our Fantasy Football Today podcast. I don't want to trust Daniel Jones going into a must-win game to get into your fantasy playoffs, but hopefully he does deliver like he has the last two games with 20-plus points. All right, let's talk about some starts and sits here. Heath, you have a guy that's coming off a huge game in Jordan Love. Can he do it again?
I don't think he's probably going to throw 4 touchdowns again, but I do think that it sets up for him to get into that 20-point range, maybe 22 points once again. He's been very, very good this year, one of the most efficient passers in the NFL. He just hasn't got to throw all that much. Last week we saw him throw 30 times. He throws 4 touchdowns. I think he throws 30 times against the Bears in a very important divisional game. I think the Bears will score enough points to keep him passing, and when he's passed, he's mostly been awesome. You look at it, 19 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, most efficient year for him as a starter.
He's awesome when he's not pressured, and the Bears have the second lowest pass rush pressure rate in the National Football League. So Jordan Love's going to have time to throw just like he did on Thanksgiving. You saw what he did on Thanksgiving? He attacked downfield. He's going to do the exact same thing against the Bears.
Should be fun. We'll see if Jaden Reed's able to play, see if Matthew Golden's able to play, but he's been getting by. Dontavian Wicks, for example, had a big game last week, and obviously Christian Watson's been playing well. So I was a little bit concerned without Tucker Kraft there, how he would perform, but great game last week. Hopefully should have another solid game. Dave, Baker Mayfield does not sound like we're going to get Mike Evans and Jalen McMillan back this week, but you still like him in this matchup at home.
Yeah, because it's the Saints, and this is another team that doesn't get a lot of pressure on the quarterback, doesn't have a great secondary to begin with, and we saw Chris Godwin come back last week. I know we debated a little bit about how much of it was breakdowns by the opponent versus how good was Chris Godwin. I thought Godwin was good. He dropped a touchdown. That would have changed things for Baker Mayfield's numbers last week. I think he comes through this week. I like him as a top 12 quarterback. I think when you look at the quarterbacks for me ranked 10 through 15, they're all in that range of, they might get you 20. And I think Baker Mayfield's a little bit better than that. That's why I have him 11, and he might even go higher than that in the ranking.
I hope so. It'd be fun to see because he was miserable against the Saints. Usually he's 20 or more.
He didn't need to do anything.
Well, now he's Bucky Irving back, so and the defense still facing a backup quarterback, or at least
I do like the defense, and I love Bucky.
A young quarterback. So I hope Baker Mayfield. His track record at home has been great, and his track record against the Saints in their history, aside from that Week 10 or Week 8 game, very, very good. I'm going to go Jacoby Brissett. He's our start of the week. Just excited for what he's been doing. 7 straight games of 20 or more fantasy points since replacing Kyler Murray. And this Rams defense, I know it's great for the most part in terms of their fantasy points allowed to opposing quarterbacks. But when they're on the road, 4 quarterbacks of 6, 19.5 fantasy points or more. And the thing about Jacoby Brissett is the volume is going to help him here. So I think as we saw Bryce Young, for example, last week, we saw Mac Jones when they played the Rams in their building. He had a big game, 29 fantasy points against this Rams defense. I think Jacoby Brissett, 40 or more pass attempts will matter. And he has another big game here against the Rams in his building. Let's talk about some quarterbacks to sit. Dave, you already sort of laid out Lamar Jackson. Anything else you want to add about why you're sitting Lamar?
Even if he had his best game in the last 3 weeks with a touchdown, that's under 15 fantasy points. That's bad.
Heath, you got Justin Herbert as a sit here. How much of this is the uncertainty of if he'll play, or just if he does play, you don't want to trust him in this matchup against the Eagles?
Yeah, that 15 where I've got him ranked is not really taking into any risk of him not playing. That's just where I project Justin Herbert to finish this week. He's averaged 6.5 yards per attempt this season when Joel is not on the field. That's a bad quarterback. Now, he's not a bad quarterback, but the efficiency is bad without Alt. And now he's not healthy either. I don't want to start him.
Yeah, it's just tough to trust. And it's not like you have a backup plan because everybody has Jalen Hurts,
right.
And you don't want to trust Trey Lance. It's not like we're seeing a situation where, okay, Justin Fields doesn't play. Maybe Tyrod Taylor would be okay. Trey Lance is awful, So it's not like, you're waiting until Monday night to, get a good replacement option here. So probably somebody you want to avoid. For me, I'm going to try and sit Caleb Williams. Look, he's been struggling as a fantasy quarterback. A lot of it is game script because of the run production that the Lions have had, but it's been now 2 bad outings in a row. 11.5 PPR, 11.5 fantasy points against Philadelphia, 10.3 fantasy points against Minnesota Week 11. Packers fell 4 of the last 5 quarterbacks to 16.2 fantasy points or less. Like, this is just not going to be a game where they ask Caleb Williams to win. It's going to be a game where DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai probably carry the way for Chicago to hopefully win this game. So I don't think Caleb Williams is a starter in a 1-quarterback league. Still starting in Superflex and 2-quarterback leagues. But if you can get away from him in 1-quarterback leagues, that's probably the smart way to go. I know it's crazy, I would start Tyrod Taylor over Caleb Williams. All right, we're going to take a break right now. We come back and get into the running back rankings. Going to tell you the guys that we like at a position. Again, we got 4 teams on a bye. It's not exactly easy, but we'll give you the starts, the sits, some players that we're a little bit nervous to rank. That's next here on Fantasy Football Today.